The genius of Geoffrey Bawa was never trying to design objects or sculptures. It was about designing lifestyle. It was about walking through space. And from the time he picks up a pencil to scribble the design on a site given, and people didn't realize that. A lot of people thought what is nice about it, what it looks like, but actually it is walking through it and using the space. So therefore, it always felt non-existent when the building actually felt non-existent when you're using it. That was the genius of Geoffrey Bawa.
宝石の国スリランカ。国土の大部分を偏西岩が占めています。宝石の元になる岩は非常に硬かったんでしょうが、かつてより地形をうまく活かした空間づくりが多数見受けられます。場所への敬意、地形のあるがままに。水、スリランカに広がる数多くの貯水池。かつての最先端の灌漑システム。また、日常とは切り離せない生活の一部であり、瞑想。日本にもある水の習慣。風呂や温泉、沐浴。水に体を浸すことは急ぎであり、湯に浸かることはその土地のエネルギーに直接触れること。教会、内と外、生と俗。こちらとあちらを分け、囲み迎えるもの。日本では、縁側は屋内と外を曖昧につなげて一体とし、社寺の回廊は結界。熱帯の大自然が広がるここで、インフィニティプールは、水と湖の境界を溶かし、森と建築の境界が溶けた空間。それが、ヘリタンス・カンダラマ。
I guess the most important lesson for us to learn from Kandalama, particularly when we were building it, was that you needed to respect what was already on the site. And the site was full of these trees and plants and rocks and so on. And the idea was, how do you sort of construct a building that somehow acknowledges their presence and makes that landscape a part of the building and the experience that you're making with the building. And I think that was a very, very important lesson during construction. So we made a lot of effort to save as many trees as possible, to try and make everything sort of just acknowledge and take nature as it was into the building. We made many changes, and I remember sort of, sometimes getting very irritated with Mr. Bawa because he said, oh no, but we have to change it to accommodate that rock or some tree. And we fashioned the design and the building to suit the landscape that we already had. So for me, it was the first project that I worked on. It was a major lesson that you have to acknowledge what is around you, the context, and make the building suitable to the context.
If we mention Mr. Bawa, he is the landmark of Sri Lankan architecture, actually contemporary architecture. So he did masterpieces because he carried out that our cultural heritage to the contemporary architecture through his works. That infinity pool is the one of the best invention of his career. Kandalama is famous because of that infinity pool with overlap in the lake water. His style, he didn't frame with that one architectural style. He worked with different clients, different clienteles, different sites, different locations. Actually, the answer is perfect with that suit with that client and the locations and the environment also.
The very intention of the Kandalama Hotel was to look at the landscape. When he was interviewed once by me for writing a little article somewhere, Geoffrey Bawa said, all I wanted to create was a belvedere from which people could observe the very, very beautiful landscape. And it is a fabulous landscape. It's a landscape of a 4th century reservoir that was built by one of the ancient kings of Sri Lanka. And across that, you had the view of 2 great monastic sites and archaeological sites. One, the mountains of Ritigala, and on the other side, the Sigiriya rock itself. And on the Dambulla wing, you actually saw the Dambulla rock. So in many ways, this was an ancient landscape with lots of stories in it. So the building had really nothing to say for itself, but to tell those stories or focus people to the stories that were out there in the landscape. So the very sort of, the very focus of the building was really about the landscape and what you could see in that landscape, and therefore what it might remind you of. The stories, the magnificent ruins that are out there in the landscape. And of course, foregrounding all of this is again this incredible irrigation reservoir. So I think it wasn't something that we had to think about later. The very essence of Kandalama is about looking out. And again, as I suggested earlier in this conversation, what Bawa does is to manipulate the space, or let's say arrange his space in such a way that wherever you walk in the hotel, you're never far from a beautifully framed view of the outside. And by kind of allowing the jungle to take over the building, he's making the building one with the landscape, and with the foreground of forest and trees, he's beginning to draw your eye out into the further landscape in many ways, like a Japanese garden, which you might sort of decide to frame Mount Fuji in it, or one of the sort of great landmarks. Bawa does the same by framing Sigiriya. As you enter into the reception and go through the tunnel, the first thing you see is the Sigiriya mountain in the distance. Again, similarly, when you go up onto the upper level terraces, you begin to see the trees framing the Ritigala mountain. Or if you go onto the Dambulla wing, you begin to see some of the trees and landscape framing Dambulla. So yes, borrowed landscape, which is full of history, was something that Bawa intended to do.
What we are trying to do is design the heart in the right place, the lungs, the kidneys, the brain, the flow, so that you're comfortable, you don't have to think too much, your whole body works. That is your prime. But you can't change the essence of a human body. And that's what I learned from Baba.
日本とスリランカ、二つの島国が育んだ文化と建築。そこには自然と共に生きるという不変の英知が宿っています。ジェフリー・バーの建築はその真実を今も静かに語り続けています。